Captain L. Vega stood at the helm of the ICS Horizon, a streamlined scout-class starship designed for deep exploration. The mission briefing had been clear: chart a path through Exo-10, locate potentially habitable worlds, and bring back fresh data for the Intergalactic Council's long-term colonization efforts. But even the most routine assignments could carry risks. Vega's Team 4 veteran explorers, including her chief navigator, Dr. Paxton Leung, and a research tech named Greaves, were on edge. The Exo-10 quadrant was largely uncharted, known only through fragmented survey reports from automated probes. The data they had on Hraxel 7 described it as a vibrant, jungle-like planet with breathable atmosphere, but the few drones that returned spoke of strange energy readings and interference patterns in the magnetic field. "We'll drop into orbit in 3 minutes," Leung announced. He swept his console for the latest scans, frowning. "I'm still getting some weird readings on the planet's surface. Could be natural, could be something else." Something else was a term that made everyone on board a little uneasy. "Noted," Vega replied, her voice steady. "Keep it on record, but proceed as planned. We'll run a standard low-altitude scan before sending down the landers." The planet unfolded below them, a shimmering green-blue orb swirled with streaks of silver mist. Clouds moved sluggishly across the atmosphere, and brilliant, organic light seemed to pulse from certain areas on the surface. As they adjusted orbit, Vega couldn't help but feel a pang of excitement despite the tension. Even after all her years in service, the sight of a new world still stirred her. Within an hour, the first landing party was dispatched. Vega, Leung, and Greaves descended in a small dropcraft, skimming the dense canopy and touching down in a clearing. Hraxel 7's air was rich with unfamiliar scents: floral, metallic, and something faintly sweet. The ground beneath them shimmered like crushed glass, though it gave underfoot with the softness of moss. As the team set up their initial instruments, Vega ventured a short distance into the jungle. She wasn't a xenobiologist, but even she could tell this place teemed with life. Strange vines moved in the corners of her vision, and soft chittering noises echoed from somewhere above. Vega's steps slowed as she noticed a faint, rhythmic hum in the air, almost like a low-frequency signal. She looked back at her crew. "You two hear that?" she called over her shoulder. Leung squinted. "Yeah, it's faint. Could be something alive, could be dash." He cut himself off, his eyes fixed on her. Vega turned to find the source of his alarm. A few yards away, tangled in what appeared to be a metallic net, was a creature unlike anything she'd ever seen. At first glance, it looked almost humanoid, tall, lithe, and covered in translucent, iridescent plates that caught the light and refracted it in mesmerizing patterns. Its arms were pinned at an awkward angle, and its head tilted to one side, glowing faintly from within. Instinctively, Vega raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "It's trapped," she murmured, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "Careful, Captain," Greaves called out. "We don't know what that thing is or what it can do." Vega ignored him. She knelt, examining the net. The strands were thin, yet strong, humming with an energy she couldn't identify. She could tell by the creature's subtle movements that it was alive, though its breathing was shallow. Without hesitation, she reached for her plasma cutter, sliced through the restraints, and watched as the net collapsed. As soon as the creature was free, it rose to its full height, well over 7 feet, and locked eyes with her. Those eyes weren't like any she'd encountered before, multifaceted, like a cut gemstone, but alive and filled with a sharp intelligence. A soft resonance filled her mind. At first, it felt like a stray thought, but then the sensation grew stronger, resolving into something distinctly purposeful. "You removed my restraint, human. By our law, we are now bonded." Vega blinked, struggling to process what she was hearing. She hadn't heard it, exactly. It had arrived in her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. "What?" she said aloud, though she knew the words wouldn't mean anything to the creature. The being tilted its head slightly. The resonance came again, clearer this time. To remove a binding is to accept responsibility for the one who wears it. By our law, you are now my bondmate. Before Vega could respond, the creature stepped back, its form beginning to shimmer. It faded from view, leaving the remnants of the collar behind an ornate loop of silver etched with geometric patterns, a softly pulsing crystal set into its center. Vega picked it up, inspecting it carefully. "Captain," Leung said, breaking her concentration. "What just happened?" Vega shook her head, slipping the collar into her utility pouch. "I don't know," she admitted, but a strange feeling settled over her. Whatever she had just done, she had a gut feeling this mission was about to become anything but routine. Back aboard the ICS Horizon, the aftermath of Captain Vega's encounter on Hraxel 7 was immediate. The crew was buzzing with speculation. News of the crystalline creature, and more importantly, the strange collar it left behind, quickly spread through the ranks. "Captain," Dr. Leung said as they entered the ship's central briefing room, "you might want to sit down for this." He tapped a console, and a holographic projection of the collar flickered to life. Its geometric patterns rotated slowly, casting shimmering reflections across the table. "This thing," Leung began, "is more than jewelry. It's emitting faint energy signals, almost like it's alive or at least designed to react to specific biosignatures." He paused, looking concerned. "And it's still resonating faintly with the planet's surface." Vega frowned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning whatever you triggered down there, it's not over," Greaves interjected, leaning forward. "You saw how that thing disappeared. It wasn't just retreating, it left you something we can't just brush off." Before Vega could respond, a sharp tone echoed through the room. The comm system activated, and the voice of their communication officer came through. "Captain, we've got incoming. A Hraxalian envoy ship just dropped into orbit." A ripple of unease spread through the room. The Hraxalians were officially classified as an uncontacted species. The Intergalactic Council had no diplomatic ties to them. Their sudden arrival meant they were aware of what had happened and were likely not happy about it. "Open a channel," Vega ordered, rising from her seat. The holographic display shifted to reveal a Hraxalian representative. The figure was similar to the one Vega had freed, tall and gleaming, with the same crystalline structure and multifaceted eyes that seemed to refract every color in the spectrum. Its voice, translated by the ship's onboard AI, was calm yet stern. "I am Cyril of the Hraxalian Council," the envoy began. "It has come to our attention that one of your crew has removed a binding from one of our people. By our laws, this is an act of great significance." "I understand," Vega said carefully. "If I caused any offense or violated any custom, I'm willing to discuss a resolution. The act was purely one of aid, nothing more." Cyril's crystalline face shifted in a way that suggested surprise. "You misunderstand. This is not an offense, it is a union. By removing the binding, you have entered into a bond that our people recognize as a sacred union of responsibility. The individual you freed, Derek's, is now tied to you in a way that cannot be undone through mere words." Vega stared at the hologram, struggling to remain composed. "With respect, I had no knowledge of this custom. Our laws and treaties do not recognize involuntary arrangements of this kind. Surely there is a way to resolve this diplomatically." Cyril's tone remained steady, but there was a sharpness to their response. "Our laws are not so easily cast aside. The bond between you and Derek's is now a matter of Hraxalian tradition and honor. It is not merely a legal agreement, it is a connection forged by a sacred act." The channel closed abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Greaves broke the tension. "Well, that's just great. First contact with a new species, and we're married into their culture." Leung looked at Vega. "What's our move, Captain?" Before Vega could answer, her personal comm device chirped. She stepped away from the group and activated the private channel. The face of Admiral Ryan appeared, a hard-edged, seasoned officer from the Intergalactic Council's diplomatic division. Vega, Ryan said, his tone gruff. We received the Hraxalian envoy's transmission. This is a mess. The Council needs you to tread carefully. I understand, Admiral, Vega replied. But I don't think they're going to let this go easily. Ryan nodded grimly. They won't. These cultural bonds run deep. The Council's priority is maintaining peace. We can't afford a diplomatic incident, not in an uncharted sector like this. Vega hesitated. Are you saying I should accept this bond? I'm saying you should find a way to de-escalate. If that means entertaining their customs for now, so be it. But whatever you do, don't antagonize them. We can't risk hostilities. When the call ended, Vega returned to the briefing room. The weight of the situation was clear on her face. Set course back to Hraxal 7's surface, she ordered. If we're going to resolve this, we need to talk to Derex directly. As the ICS horizon descended, Vega couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her chest. She hadn't asked for this bond, but now the fate of their mission and possibly interstellar relations rested on how she handled it. As soon as the team's shuttle touched down again on Hraxal 7, Captain Vega felt the gravity of the situation both figuratively and literally. The Hraxalian capital loomed ahead, a glimmering metropolis grown from the planet's natural crystal formations. Spires rose skyward like shards of light, refracting the faint blue glow that emanated from the ground. The Hraxalians were waiting. At the edge of the landing zone, a delegation led by the envoy Cyril and Derex himself stood in formation. Derex had changed since Vega last saw him. His crystalline form, previously dimmed from injury, now pulsed with an inner radiance. He stepped forward, his telepathic voice resonating clearly in her mind. Captain Vega, the Council has determined that you must undergo the trials of unbinding. Only through these trials can the bond be dissolved. If you succeed, you will be released from our laws and traditions. If you fail... His tone softened, though the implications were clear. The bond will be permanent. Vega squared her shoulders, meeting Derex's multifaceted gaze. I don't want to disrespect your traditions, but I need to understand what I'm walking into. What are these trials, exactly? Cyril spoke next, their voice crisp and authoritative. The trials are a series of challenges designed to reveal the true nature of the bond. They are not merely physical tests. They delve into perception, intention, and mutual understanding. If you truly wish to be released from this union, you must demonstrate that the connection between you and Derex was a mistake, that you have no place in each other's lives. The crystalline figures stepped aside, revealing a shimmering archway. Beyond it, Vega saw a maze of crystalline walls that reflected her own image, warped and fragmented. Derex gestured toward it. I will enter the maze as well. The trials will test us both. Both of us? Vega asked. If I want to separate, shouldn't I be the only one tested? Derex's voice resonated with something almost like amusement. You misunderstand. The bond is shared. For it to be severed, we must both prove that it was never meant to exist. Cyril gestured toward the archway. The trials of unbinding begin when you pass through this gate. The path will be different for each of you, though you may cross each other's steps. Every trial will reveal something about the nature of your connection. Proceed when ready. Vega looked back at her team one last time. Greaves gave her a nod of encouragement, while Leon's expression held quiet concern. With a deep breath, Vega stepped forward, Derex just a pace behind her. The maze shimmered and shifted as they entered, its crystalline walls humming faintly as though alive. The first trial was subtle. Vega found herself in a chamber with mirrored walls, each surface showing her own reflection, but something was off. In some images, she was younger, just starting out in the service. In others, she was older, battle-hardened and weary. One reflection showed her face lit with determination, another with doubt. A voice hers, yet not hers, whispered in her mind. What did you see in him that made you remove the collar? Vega frowned. I wasn't thinking of him. I was just trying to help. Anyone in his position would have deserved that much. Her reflection didn't change, but the voice returned. Was it only duty? Or was it compassion? Before she could answer, the reflections shifted, blending together, and the crystalline walls opened to reveal a new path. The second trial was more tangible. The air grew dense, charged with energy, as Vega walked into a room where floating shards of crystal hung in perfect balance. As soon as she stepped forward, the shards began to move, spinning faster and faster, threatening to cut through her path. She froze, calculating her options, but then another resonance entered her mind. Focus on me. It was Derek's. Though she couldn't see him, she felt his presence. What are you doing? She asked, glancing around. Trust me. Walk slowly and think of nothing but the bond, Derek's voice instructed. Vega hesitated, then began to walk. As she concentrated on the strange connection between them, the faint hum she'd felt since the moment she removed the collar, the spinning shard slowed. They parted just enough for her to pass through unscathed. When she stepped through the room, the shards returned to their calm, balanced state. Vega looked back, her heart racing. What was that about? Derek's voice returned. The trials respond to the bond. The stronger it becomes, the safer the path. The final trial was not a room, but a vision. Vega found herself standing in the midst of a great Raxalian gathering. She saw herself not as a human explorer, but as an accepted part of their society, standing beside Derek's, aiding in negotiations, learning their culture, even embracing their traditions. The vision filled her with a strange warmth, but also a sense of unease. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Yet it felt so. Possible. Derek's appeared beside her in the vision. What do you see, Vega? He asked, his crystalline eyes shimmering with quiet curiosity. I see something that isn't true, she said firmly. This isn't the life I set out for. He tilted his head. And yet, you do not look away. Vega turned to him, unsure of how to respond. Before she could speak, the vision faded. The crystalline maze shimmered and dissolved around her, leaving her standing at the archway again. When the trials ended, Vega emerged from the maze feeling drained, but also strangely clear-headed. Derek stood waiting, his form still glowing faintly. He inclined his head. Captain Vega, the trials have revealed much. The Council will review what has been learned. But it is clear that the bond is not as weak as you believed. Vega frowned. I never asked for this bond. I didn't know what removing that collar meant. Yet now you do, Derek said. What happens next will not be decided by tradition alone. As they returned to the delegation, Vega felt the weight of the trials settle over her. Whatever the outcome, she knew the connection between her and Derek's was no longer just a cultural misunderstanding. It was something she would have to confront fully, on her own terms. The return from the maze left Captain Vega more confused than she expected. Though the trials of unbinding were meant to sever her bond with Derek's, the experience had stirred feelings she wasn't prepared to confront. As the Raxalian Council gathered to deliberate, Vega stood on a polished platform overlooking the luminous crystal city. The air buzzed softly with the ambient energy of Raxel 7, and the collar she had carried since her first encounter with Derek's felt heavier at her side. Behind her, Derek stood quietly. Despite his usual stoic demeanor, she could sense a shift in his energy. The once clear line between rescuer and rescued, between misunderstanding and intent, had blurred. They had seen each other's pasts, their fears, and their hopes during the trials. For Vega, the memory of standing shoulder to shoulder with Derek's and the vision lingered, a future that felt impossibly far away yet oddly attainable. Captain Vega. Cyril's resonant voice brought her back to the moment. The council elder and several other crystalline figures had emerged from the spire, their multifaceted eyes glowing with iridescent light. We have reviewed the results of the trials. While you both have proven capable of separating, the bond has clearly deepened rather than weakened. Cyril paused, as if weighing the weight of the next words. According to our traditions, this would typically mean that the union must remain intact. However, we understand that your customs differ from ours. To force this bond upon you would dishonor the very principles we hold dear. Relief washed over Vega for a brief moment before Cyril continued. Yet it is clear that your actions, your decision to free Derricks, your willingness to face our trials, and the connection that has emerged cannot be ignored. Rather than dissolve the bond, we propose something different, a new form of alliance. Vega straightened, unsure of what Cyril meant. A new form? Yes. You and Derricks represent something unprecedented, a union not only of individuals, but of cultures. If you both agree, this bond could serve as the foundation for greater understanding between our peoples. Derricks stepped forward, his voice soft in Vega's mind. Captain, we have the chance to make something meaningful out of this. The trials revealed to me that I have much to learn from you and much I can teach. I do not wish to enforce a bond you do not want. But if you are willing, we can redefine what this connection means. Vega hesitated. The logical part of her wanted to accept the Council's decision, end the misunderstanding, and leave this planet behind. But something deeper, something she couldn't quite name, made her pause. She remembered the vision, the way it felt to bridge the gap between two worlds, to work alongside Derricks not out of obligation but out of mutual respect and understanding. I don't know where this will lead, she admitted finally. But if there's a chance we can learn from each other, build something that benefits both our people, I'm willing to try. Cyril inclined their crystalline head. Then it is decided. The bond will remain, not as a marriage, but as a symbol of cooperation. Captain Vega, Derricks, you are now the living bridge between our worlds. In the days that followed, Vega worked closely with Derricks and the Hraxalian Council. She explained human traditions, laws, and diplomacy, while Derricks introduced her to the intricate workings of Hraxalian culture. The collar that once symbolized a misunderstood union now served as a ceremonial emblem of their alliance. Through their combined efforts, the Intergalactic Council and the Hraxalians began formal talks that opened new trade routes, shared knowledge, and strengthened ties between two vastly different civilizations. Vega remained on Hraxal 7 longer than she had planned, her initial mission transforming into something far more complex and fulfilling. In the end, the bond that had begun as a misunderstanding became a cornerstone of something greater. The name Vega-Derricks Accord would eventually be spoken in classrooms and council chambers across the galaxy, remembered not as a mistake, but as the moment two worlds decided to truly understand one another.